This is the word of the Lord.
I'll try it the way Graham and David does it. There are some passages in the Bible which seem, on the surface at least, to be straightforward, but at the same time almost too deep to comprehend. And I've heard that reading read about 4 or 5 times this week in various contexts through my work. And when Anne read it, I went, I still don't really understand what he's talking about. This passage from John's Gospel is one of those readings that look on the surface to be completely easy to get, but Jesus in chapter 9 has just healed a blind man, and he's challenged the very blindness of the Pharisees in chapter 9. So it's kind of about the Pharisees, you would imagine. But then John has Jesus saying, in verse 1, in my version it says, "Very truly I say to you." I think in what Anne read it was, "I tell you the truth. Very truly I say to you." And this phrase is an indication that what's about to come is very truly important. And we'd better listen up. Okay, I've got that. Thank you, Jesus. But then there's all this talk about sheep and sheep gates and the gatekeeper and the shepherd to whom the sheep respond, and strangers and thieves and bandits. As I say, on the surface, I kind of get it, but I really don't understand, if I'm truly honest. What does Jesus really mean by saying he's the gate through which we enter to be saved? Now, if, as I might, go to the pub this afternoon and I'm asked, what was the Bible reading in church this morning? And of course, everyone always asks that. Not. And I read them this passage and say to them, I read the passage about the sheep, and they would say to me something to the effect of, "What the heck does that mean?" And I have to confess, I'd probably, I'm not really sure what I'd say. At the end of the passage in verse 10, Jesus says, "I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." Abundant life. Perhaps that's a bit easier. Maybe. Possibly. Is it really easier to understand? For what is this abundant life? What does it look like? What does it feel like? When and how often do I or we experience it? So I guess rather than thinking about the sheep and the sheep gate and all of that, I immediately was drawn to the abundant life. So I got reading a little bit about that, and I read Father Ron Rollheister's commentary, and he says, inside each of us there is a deep congenital restlessness. We are not restful beings who sometimes get restless, but restless beings who occasionally experience rest. Karl Rahner, I believe, had it right, he says, when he said that we do not have souls that get restless, but that our souls themselves are lonely caverns thirsting for the infinite, deep wells of restlessness that make us ache to sleep with the whole world and all that is beyond. Because of this, we can find it difficult to concentrate during the day and to sleep at night. We go through life feeling like we are missing out on something. that life is more exciting and fulfilling for others than it is for us. Our achievements rarely satisfy us because we're always aware of what we haven't achieved, of missed chances, failed possibilities. Always, too, it seems that we are inadequate to the task that we must not disappoint those we love, but we do. We're always a bit dissatisfied. As Henri Nouwen puts it, in this life it seems that there is no such thing as a clear-cut, pure joy, but that even our happiest moments come with a shadow, a fear, a jealousy, a restlessness inside us. No matter what our age, we are always somewhat lost and full of sadness. One that we don't quite know what to do with. Thoreau was right. We do live lives of quiet desperation. And what should we do with that? And I read that and I thought, now that's something I can agree to and relate with. Sometimes life does not feel particularly abundant. Perhaps it's true in this sort of age that we live in, that's even more true. But maybe I'm looking at abundance in the wrong way. I often do that. In preparing and thinking about this, I read a commentary on this passage by an American minister called Steve Goodyear, and I just cacked myself laughing. What a name for a minister. Reverend Goodyear. Sorry, small things amuse small minds, as my father would say. In which he relates 3 real-life stories, which in a way changed my whole thinking. So let me read those stories to you because they're really good. Gretchen Alexander is sightless, but she refuses to allow her blindness to limit her life activities. She enjoys archery, golf, softball, sailing, water skiing, as well as a number of other activities that those of us who are sighted have yet to learn. She also speaks to groups about living life fully. When speaking to a group of high school students, she was once asked if there was anything she wouldn't try. She said, I've decided to never try to skydive. It would scare the heck out of my dog. Why do some people rise above their problems and live life fully while others become defeated? Merle Shane explains it in this way. There are only 2 ways to approach life: as a victim or as a gallant fighter. And every day the decision is ours. Or put it another way, we can believe we're helpless or we can believe we're powerful and capable. And every day we reaffirm our belief. Another person who knew what it was to live sightless, not to mention soundless, was Helen Keller. She famously pointed out that although the world is full of suffering, it's also full of the overcoming of suffering. Does that sound like someone who believes she is helpless, or like someone who believes she is capable? And the third story, I love the perspective of a shop owner in Nottingham, England. He posted this notice in the window of his coat store. We've been established for over 100 years and we've been pleasing and displeasing customers ever since. We've made money and lost money, suffered the effects of coal rationalisation, coat rationing, government control and bad payers. We've been cussed and discussed, messed about, lied to, held up, robbed, swindled. The only reason we stay in business is to see what happens next. When discouraged, some people will give up, give in, or give out far too early. They blame their problems on difficult situations, unreasonable people, or their own inabilities. When discouraged, other people will push back that first impulse to quit, push down their initial fear, push through the feelings of helplessness and push ahead, they're less likely to find something to blame and more likely to find a way through. And I read those two comparisons and I thought, which am I? Which are you? I've been getting some daily meditations from a group, a C.S. Lewis group. And Lewis has this quite phenomenal, I wish I could read all of it, it's quite a phenomenal comment about the unabundant, how unabundant we might perceive the last days of Jesus' life. Think about it. Think about the last days of Jesus' life. We've just gone through that and heard the stories repeated. Does not every movement in the Passion writ large, some common element in the sufferings of our race? First, the prayer of anguish, not granted. Then he turns to his friends, they are asleep. Then he faces the church, the very church that he brought into existence, and it condemns him. That sounds a little familiar to me. In every church, in every institution, there is something which sooner or later works against the very purpose for which it came into existence. But there seems to be another chance. There's the state, in this case the Roman state. Its pretensions are far lower than those of the Jewish church, but for that very reason, it may be free from local fanaticisms. It claims to be just on a rough worldly level, yes, but only so as it consistent with political expediency. One becomes a counter in a complicated game. But even now, all is not lost. There is still an appeal to the people, the poor and simple, whom he had blessed, Jesus had blessed, whom he had healed and fed and taught, to whom he himself belongs. But they become overnight, and it's nothing unusual, a murderous rabble shouting for his blood. There is then nothing left but God. And to God, his last words are, "Why have you forsaken me?" You see how characteristic, how representative, says Lewis, all this is. The human situation writ large. These are among the things it means to be human. Every rope breaks when you seize it. Every door is slammed shut as you reach it. Doesn't sound overly abundant. And Lewis finishes this thought by saying, let us be thankful that whatever we go through in life, God understands and will be with us. And he quotes the final verse of Psalm 23, which is the psalm for today. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Can we hear a reflection in that verse from Psalm 23 of the abundant life? Jesus promises, when Jesus cried out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" You have to wonder, or at least I do, how abundant was his life feeling at that moment? I don't think the abundant life promised by Jesus has much, if anything, to do with feeling, with any sort of feeling. Instead, it's about recognising that God is with us no matter what deep, dark valleys we may confront. And it's as we reflect on our life's experiences that we might see and feel and acknowledge that our life has had an abundance of blessings. Richard Rohr, along with C.S. Lewis and Henri Nouwen, enrich and nourish my life. Richard Rohr, it was actually a meditation from the 23rd of April, quotes Meister Eckhart as saying, God only asks that you get out of God's way and let God be God in you. And Rohr goes on to describe the spiritual discipline of detachment as the practice of letting go. He says, in the larger-than-life people I've met, I always find one common denominator. In some sense, they have all died before they died. And thus they are larger than death. Please think about that. At some point, they were led to the edge of their private resources, and that breakdown, which surely felt like dying, led them into a larger life. He says all great spirituality is about letting go. Instead, we have made it to be about taking in, attaining, performing, winning, and succeeding. True spirituality echoes the paradox of life itself. Each time, says Richard Rohr, I learn to let go of what I thought was necessary for my own happiness, and we might translate happiness there in this context as abundance, I invariably find myself in a larger place, a larger space, a deeper union, a greater joy. I'm sorry I can't prove that to you, he says. We only know it after the fact. In the last season of my life, and many of us in this room are in that period, in the last season of my life, I realised that what's in front of me is still largely darkness, but it doesn't matter anymore. That's because letting go has taught me that I can look back, not forward, back at the past of my life, and I can truthfully say, what have I ever lost by dying? What have I ever lost by losing? I have fallen upward again and again. By falling, I have found, by letting go, I have discovered. And I find myself in these later years of my life still surprised that that is true. So in my efforts here to understand what the abundant life may be about, Jesus speaks in verse 10, of which Jesus speaks in verse 10 of chapter 10. I think that what Meister Eckhart and Richard Rohr have to say is the key to understanding it. Let us get out of God's way and let God be God in us. And let us let go of the need to make our life what we think it's supposed to be. You know what, dear friends, we can trust and rely on God, even in the darkest moments and through the deepest valleys. And if we can learn to let go and allow God to be God, then we might, no, in fact, we will experience the life abundant that the Good Shepherd wishes us, each of us, to have. Let us pray. Eternal friend who calls and guides us, help us to hear your voice in our fellowship, in our journeys through life this day. Lead us to deeper understanding of the abundant life which you promise to each of us, and to our participation in a world of love overflowing. Let goodness and mercy follow us all the days of our lives, and let us dwell here and now with you in all that that means, all that we have to discover that it means. In the name of Christ, amen.